Hi folks, it's Mr. Defy once again. Welcome back to another video on how to write a linear function. This time we're going to focus on how to create a linear function from a table. The last time we looked at linear functions, our goal was actually not necessarily to write one, but how to graph one. And here are the notes from the previous video. I prefaced that with telling you a little bit about what a linear function actually is. And I said that there are three different equations for this. We're looking at only one of them for now. It's y equals mx plus b. And the two parts of this that you want to really remember are what m and b actually stand for. So the letter m represents slope, which is another way of saying movement along the same line. And this is usually represented as the idea of changing in y over the changing in x. Whereas the b, it represents the y-intercept, which is just another way of saying where a line cuts through the y-axis on your graph. And the b number, because it's a point where that intersection takes place, will always be represented by the ordered pair 0, comma, whatever the number for b is. And so after that quick recap, we can come back down here and take a look at this first example. Our goal here is to create a function by just knowing values in a table. And just like before, you want to begin with your b number because b is for beginning. And the idea that this is the y-intercept and it's a point, and because of that you can represent it as 0, comma, a number, means that when you look at your table, you want to look for a pair of numbers along the same row that resemble that 0, comma, b. And in this case, it's pretty clear that this is the 1. So what we do is we take the 2, which is our y value, we take that 2 and we simply replace it into our function. And what we end up getting, if I rewrite this, is the following. I get y is equal to mx plus 2. Okay, now we're almost done, believe it or not. But the last thing we have to do will take a little bit more thinking, because now we have to figure out what is the slope, what is that number that belongs there. To figure this out, we have to be a little observant of the numbers that are in this table. I recommend choosing any two rows that you want. They don't have to be in consecutive order. They can be the top and the very bottom, or the ones in the middle. And the reason for that is because all these values here represent ordered pairs, which in turn each represent a point that lies along the same line on your graph. Okay? And so for that reason, it doesn't matter which ones you pick, but you do need two of them. So as an example, I will choose the first row and the third row. Notice the direction of my arrow. I'm going down the table. And if you want, you can turn around and go up the table. Again, it doesn't matter. It's like going up or down a line. And I'll show you how both give you the same answer in the end. But remember that slope, m is slope, which is your change in y over your change in x. And it's important to remember at this point that the change in y really does mean that the y's are changing. And as you can see here, my -1 is becoming a 5. So I need to write it the way I say it. So -1 is becoming a 5. Now the idea of change in algebra is shown by a subtraction. So it's -1 changing into a 5. That's what that really means. I do the same thing with the x's and I get -5 is changing into a positive 5. Okay, all the numbers are going positive as I go down the table. At this point I want to simplify, so what I get is -6. In the denominator I get -10. And a good rule to remember, no matter what level of math you're in, is that if you have a fraction that can be reduced, you should reduce it. So by dividing this and this with a 2, what I get is a more simplified version. Again, keep in mind you have two negatives here, and that also will change into a positive. So this is going to become +2, excuse me, +3. That becomes +5. Now that's my slope, and that's going to go in place of my m. So if I rewrite it, I get m is equal to 3 over 5, x plus 2. And with that, my function is completed, and that's the end. But there's one more thing I want to show you. I want to show you that this 3 over 5 can be gained by using any other number from this table that you want. And just to give you an example of that, if I were to choose, let's say, the very last row, and I wanted to go backwards, just one row that way. Notice two things. Number one, I'm choosing two different numbers than before, 10 and 8. And secondly, instead of going down the table, I'm going up the table. But I want to show you it makes no difference. So if I were to get the change in y over change in x again, using these two numbers, first of all, I want to start with the number I began with. For the y's, 8 is becoming a 5. So I write it the way I say it, 8 becoming a 5. In the denominator, my 10 is turning into a 5. So 10 becoming a 5. Okay? And then I simplify this. So 8 minus 5 is 3, and 10 minus 5 is 5. And look at that. These are exactly the same as each other. And they are supposed to be. Okay? Again, for the same reason I explained earlier, all these are points that are along the same line. So the slope is supposed to be the same, no matter what. Okay? That's example 1. Example 2 looks like this. So in example 2, we start the same way again. I want to identify in this table my beginning point, my y-intercept. And the y-intercept, once again, which will be whatever number goes there, it will be a pair of numbers that look like this. So I'm going to illustrate this for you again. This is your beginning, and it's going to be 0, comma, whatever number you see there. And if you look, it's very obvious that that number would be in that row. That's 0 and negative 4. So the number I'm concerned with is the y being that negative 4. So what I will do is replace this function with what I know so far, which is y equals mx. Now, you could put plus minus 4, but I'm going to be honest, that looks a bit strange. The better way to do this would be to just write minus 4. Okay? It looks more professional that way. That minus makes the 4 negative. Now, from this point, all I have to do is get the slope, which is, again, the change in y or change in x. And you can see that I have it set up in two different ways here. So I want to show you two different examples of how to get the same answer. So we're going to go with, let's see, I'll choose this row, and I'll go down one level here. This row, one level down. Okay? And my numbers, if you look carefully, I start with a 14. And the 14 is changing into a negative 4. Notice that it becomes a double negative. And the 3, the negative 3 is becoming a 0. So negative 3 changes to a 0. Now, a double negative like this means you get a positive. So now it's 14 plus 4. Negative 3 minus 0. 0 means nothing in English. So if it's nothing, we just have negative 3. 14 plus 4 is 18. So now we have 18 divided by negative 3. And if you can divide that, you should do it. So 18 divided by negative 3 is negative 6. That's my slope. So I go into my function, and I replace the m with what I now have, which is negative 6x minus 4. And that is the end. But I want to show you how to get the same slope using a different set of numbers, because it really does not make a difference, because they're all in the same line anyway. So I'm going to go with the very last row going up this time, the very last row going up. And so my numbers for this, I start with negative 16 for the y's. I'm starting here, and I end up over there. So negative 16 is changing into a 20. Whereas for the x's, the 2 is changing into a negative 4. So 2 changes into negative 4. And then you simplify. So the numerator becomes negative 36. The denominator, because of that double negative, once again, remember what happens there. Double negatives become positive. So here I get 2 plus 4. So it's negative 36 divided by 6, which becomes negative 6. And once again, they're exactly the same, as they should be. And that's the end, folks. So I hope this video helped you learn how to write a linear function by looking at values in a table. Remember the two things I mentioned earlier, slope and y-intercept are the key, and you begin with the y-intercept. B is for beginning. If you have any comments, please post them. I'm always interested in knowing how I can better improve my videos, and thank you for taking time to watch. Bye-bye.